reason for 25 seconds. There comes a time when we must face an uncomfortable truth about the relationships we hold dear. That the bonds we share with our family and friends are not merely built on common interests or shared history, but are also the battlegrounds for a conflict that is spiritual in nature. It may sound startling at first, but if we look a little closer, we begin to see that many of our deepest connections can become targets for unseen forces determined to sow discord and division. We often think of disagreements or misunderstandings as natural occurrences, inevitable byproducts of living closely with others. Yet there are moments when the tension seems to run deeper than human imperfection alone. In those moments, it is worth pausing to consider that there might be an underlying spiritual agenda at work, an agenda aimed at breaking the bonds that unite us. Imagine for a moment a family gathering where laughter once flowed freely, but now every conversation is punctuated by subtle barbs and unspoken resentments. At first, you might chalk it up to a few rough patches that every family endures. But when these conflicts grow in intensity and frequency, you begin to wonder if there is something more than just human failing behind it. There is an enemy who delights in exploiting our vulnerabilities, whispering lies that pit brother against sister, parent against child, friend against friend. His strategy is not to create grand battles, but to plant tiny seeds of distrust and then nurture them into full-blown strife. We must understand that these battles are not always apparent on the surface. The enemy is clever. He does not need to announce his presence. Instead, he works subtly, using the natural human emotions of pride, anger, and hurt as conduits for his destructive power. Often, what starts as a minor disagreement can quickly escalate into a rift that seems impossible to mend. And when we allow these seemingly insignificant issues to go unaddressed, they become the fertile ground upon which division thrives. This is why it is so important for us to recognize that our most cherished relationships might be under attack from forces we cannot see. The key to protection, then, lies in awareness. When we begin to see our family and friends as part of a larger spiritual tapestry, we come to realize that every smile, every tear, every word of kindness or criticism has a dimension beyond the physical. Our interactions carry a spiritual weight, and they become opportunities either for the enemy to drive a wedge between us or for us to build bridges of love and understanding. Recognizing this reality means that we must be vigilant, not only in guarding our hearts against hurt, but also in nurturing an environment where love and forgiveness can flourish. I encourage you to reflect on those moments when you have felt an inexplicable tension in a conversation, or an unexplained distance in a relationship. Instead of attributing these solely to human miscommunication, consider that there might be more at play. This doesn't mean blaming every conflict on spiritual forces, but rather being open to the possibility that our adversary is active in the realm of our closest bonds. When we accept that reality, we empower ourselves to respond differently. Responding not with hardened hearts or defensive attitudes, but with prayer, compassion, and a renewed commitment to unity. There is also a call to introspection here. It is essential to recognize that our own actions, whether intentional or not, can open the door to these unseen attacks. Bitterness, unspoken grudges, or unresolved anger can serve as gateways for division. In essence, the enemy does not have to work as hard if we already harbor resentment or allow past hurts to fester. By choosing to address our own internal battles through forgiveness and honest communication, we fortify our relationships against the subtle invasions of discord. When we view our relationships as sacred spaces, the way we interact shifts dramatically. We begin to see every shared meal, every heart-to-heart talk, as an opportunity to reaffirm the love and unity that binds us. We become more discerning, noticing when a hurtful comment isn't just a slip of the tongue, but a sign of something deeper at work. And in those moments, we have the chance to choose differently, to bring the light of understanding into dark corners where division might otherwise take root. Let this awareness transform the way you approach your family and friendships. Instead of taking every conflict at face value, look deeper and ask yourself, what is really happening here? In doing so, you may uncover opportunities not just to heal, but to strengthen the bonds that are so precious. Understand that while we may not always see the forces behind the scenes, our response is within our control. By guarding our hearts and leaning on love and forgiveness, we reclaim our relationships from any enemy who might seek to undermine them. Keep your eyes open and your heart tender, for the unity you nurture is far more resilient than any force that dares to divide you. Resend for 26 seconds. There are moments when the tension in our relationships seems to defy explanation. A subtle shift in tone, an unexplained coldness, or a recurring pattern of hurtful words that just won't fade away. I want to share with you today about discerning these hidden signs of demonic influence, because too often what appears to be ordinary conflict is something far more sinister at work. You see, our family and friends are not just companions on our earthly journey, they are also the very arenas where spiritual battles are fought. And sometimes the enemy doesn't announce his presence with thunder and lightning. Instead, he works quietly, weaving doubt, resentment, and division into our most cherished bonds. Consider a scenario where, over time, a particular conversation always seems to end in unresolved bitterness. It might start with a simple misunderstanding, but then old wounds are reopened, and harsh words are exchanged that linger long after the moment has passed. When such a pattern repeats, it isn't merely a coincidence or a failure of communication. It may be a sign that the enemy is exploiting our vulnerabilities. His tactics are subtle. He sows seeds of discord in the fertile ground of our unresolved hurts. If we are not careful, these seeds can grow into a tangled thicket of anger and resentment, making reconciliation seem impossible. Another subtle indicator to be aware of is the manipulation of our emotions. You might notice that a certain person in your circle, whether a family member or a close friend, consistently stirs up suspicion or incites discord without a clear reason. It's as if they have a way of twisting words and circumstances, turning a harmless comment into a catalyst for conflict. This is not just poor communication, it can be a calculated move to fracture the unity that should bind us together. When you see this pattern, it's important to ask yourself, is this truly the person I thought I knew? Or is there an influence at work that is attempting to undermine trust and love? It's also essential to pay attention to the emotional climate that surrounds you. There are times when an environment that once thrived on warmth and connection gradually becomes cloaked in an air of negativity. A negativity that seems to seep into every conversation and every gathering. It's more than just a series of bad days. It's a persistent state that feels almost imposed upon you when you sense that the atmosphere is not natural, that it has been infected by an unyielding spirit of pessimism or criticism. That could be another sign that the enemy is active in your midst. His goal is not to cause a single argument, but to establish an ongoing regime of discord that slowly wears down your defenses against division. Now let me be clear, discerning these hidden influences does not mean that every conflict should be immediately labeled as spiritual warfare. Human frailty is real, and we all have moments of misunderstanding and anger. However, when conflicts become repetitive, when the same hurtful themes resurface no matter how many times you try to resolve them, it's time to consider that there might be more at play. Ask yourself if these issues are purely about the present moment, or if they are dragging old, unhealed wounds into the light. The process of discernment begins with a sincere commitment to self-reflection and prayer. Spend time asking God for wisdom and clarity so that you can see beyond the immediate emotions and understand the deeper dynamics at work. Look inward as well as outward. Often, the enemy uses our own unresolved pain as a gateway to sow further division. By healing our own hearts and addressing the wounds that may have been left unattended, we not only fortify ourselves, but also create a barrier against those forces that seek to exploit our vulnerabilities. It's also crucial to foster an environment of open and honest communication within your relationships. When misunderstandings arise, approach them with a spirit of inquiry rather than accusation. By seeking to understand the root of an issue and addressing it together, you dismantle the strongholds where negativity might take hold. Remember, the enemy thrives in secrecy and isolation. When we come together in the light of truth, we deprive him of the power to create lasting division. Every relationship we hold dear is a sacred trust, and the call to discern these hidden influences is an invitation to protect that trust. It's about being vigilant and proactive rather than reactive. It's about recognizing that beneath every harsh word or unexplained rift, there might be a deeper, spiritual battle being waged. And when we learn to see these signs, we can choose to respond with love, forgiveness, and the steadfast commitment to unity that only a heart aligned with God can offer. Keep your discernment sharp and your heart open to the light, for in unity there is strength, and in love there is victory. Reasoned for 27 seconds. There are times when the weight of unresolved sin and bitterness feels so heavy that it becomes almost impossible to breathe, almost impossible to see beyond the pain. I've come to realize that when these wounds are left unaddressed, they create a fertile ground where darkness finds a place to grow. Unresolved sin isn't just about a mistake that was made, it's about the lingering hurt, the unhealed wounds that continue to fester and poison the well of our relationships. When we allow that bitterness to take root, we open the door for destructive forces that thrive on division, feeding on the negative energy that settles in our hearts. I remember moments when family gatherings turned from joyful reunions into battlegrounds of silent tension and stinging words. It wasn't always about the issues at hand, rather, it was the residue of old grievances that had never been properly addressed. That lingering pain acted as a magnet, drawing in conflict and giving the enemy a foothold in places that should have been safe. Bitterness, if left unchecked, can distort every interaction. It clouds our judgment, making even small disagreements feel insurmountable, and turns once cherished connections into sources of constant strife. The truth is, every time we hold on to our hurt, every time we let unresolved sin stand in the way of healing, we inadvertently create a breeding ground for darkness. The enemy doesn't need to create new conflicts. He simply magnifies the ones that already exist, turning what might have been a minor misunderstanding into a deep, lasting divide. Unresolved sin can become a wall that isolates us from those we love, making it hard to see each other clearly or to speak words of healing. It's like carrying a hidden burden that slowly erodes the very foundation of our relationships. I know that confronting these deep-seated wounds isn't easy. It takes courage to face our own shortcomings, to admit that we too have contributed to the pain, whether intentionally or not. It takes even more to approach someone else with an open heart, acknowledging the hurt that has been caused and asking for forgiveness. But here's the thing. When we allow bitterness to linger, we're not just harming ourselves, we're giving power to the enemy. Every unspoken word, every unresolved conflict becomes a foothold for negativity that can spread and infect every corner of our lives. Healing begins with honesty. It starts by recognizing that the pain we feel isn't just a random part of life. It's a sign that something deeper is at work. When we choose to confront our sin and bitterness, we're taking a stand against the forces that seek to keep us divided. It means looking into the mirror and admitting that we have allowed the past to dictate the present, that we've held on to grudges that only serve to poison our hearts. And when we do that, we open ourselves up to the transformative power of forgiveness. Forgiveness is not about excusing the wrongdoing or pretending that the hurt never happened. It's about freeing ourselves from the heavy chains of resentment. It's a deliberate choice to let go of the past and to embrace the healing that comes from grace. When we forgive, we are actively disarming the enemy, shutting down the places in our hearts where darkness might otherwise thrive. Forgiveness is both an act of love and a spiritual strategy. It's how we reclaim our relationships and restore the unity that once defined them. I've seen firsthand the difference that comes when bitterness is replaced with forgiveness. Relationships that once seemed irreparably broken began to show signs of healing as walls of mistrust crumbled away and the light of understanding started to shine through. It wasn't an instant transformation, and it certainly wasn't easy, but every step taken in forgiveness was a step away from the darkness that once threatened to consume everything. In our journey toward healing, it's important to remember that letting go of unresolved sin is a process. It may require prayer, honest conversations, and sometimes even seeking help from those who can offer guidance. The key is not to allow these wounds to remain unattended. For every moment that passes is another opportunity for bitterness to take a deeper hold. Instead, let us choose to face our pain head-on, to lean into forgiveness, and to trust that as we do, God's healing power will work in ways we can hardly imagine. Keep forgiving, keep healing, for in your forgiveness lies the promise of a restored and united future. There is something deeply unsettling about the moment you realize that someone you trusted, someone you loved, has been working against you all along. Betrayal is one of the most painful wounds a person can experience, not just because of the act itself, but because of who it comes from. It is not the stranger on the street who has the power to truly wound us. It is the family member who once held our hand, the friend who knew our secrets, the person we once believed would stand by us no matter what. And when that trust is broken, when loyalty is discarded like it was never there to begin with, the wound is not just emotional, it is spiritual. Because betrayal is not simply about a failed relationship. It is about an attack on the very bonds that were meant to uplift and strengthen us. The enemy has been using betrayal as a weapon since the beginning of time. He whispers lies, twists words, and stirs jealousy and resentment in the hearts of those closest to us. And once that poison takes root, a person who once walked beside us can suddenly turn into someone who seeks to harm us. It may start subtly. Small acts of deception, little moments of dishonesty that go unnoticed. But over time, these betrayals grow. And before we know it, the person we once trusted has become a tool in the hands of the enemy, carrying out destruction they may not even fully understand. This is why betrayal cuts so deeply, because it is never just about one moment, one action. It is about the trust that was given, the history that was shared, and the realization that the connection was not what it seemed. It creates doubt, not just in the person who betrayed us, but in our ability to trust anyone at all. And if we are not careful, that doubt begins to spread, shaping the way we view the world and the people in it. The enemy wants nothing more than for betrayal to turn into isolation, for us to close ourselves off, to live in suspicion, to build walls so high that even those with good intentions cannot get through. But we must be wiser than that. When we face betrayal, it is easy to give in to anger, to wish harm upon the person who wronged us, to seek revenge in ways that feel justified. But in doing so, we only allow the enemy to win again. Because the true damage of betrayal is not just in the act itself, it is in what it does to our hearts afterward. If we allow bitterness to take hold, if we let resentment guide our steps, then the betrayal continues to have power over us long after the person who wronged us is gone. The only way to break free from the grip of betrayal is through forgiveness, and I know how impossible that sounds. I know that forgiveness feels like letting the other person win, like excusing the harm they have caused, but that is not what forgiveness is. Forgiveness is not about pretending the betrayal didn't happen. It is about refusing to let it control your life. It is about choosing healing over hatred, peace over revenge. It is about taking back the power that betrayal tried to steal from you. This does not mean you must continue to allow harmful people to remain in your life. Some betrayals are so deep that the relationship cannot and should not be repaired. Forgiveness does not mean tolerating repeated harm. It means releasing the hold that pain has over you, choosing to move forward without carrying the weight of resentment. It means recognizing that while betrayal is a tool of the enemy, healing is a gift from God. There will always be those who allow themselves to be used as instruments of division. Some will betray for selfish gain, some out of weakness, and some simply because they do not understand the gravity of their actions. But no betrayal, no matter how painful, has the power to define you. What defines you is how you rise from it, how you choose to heal, how you refuse to let it make you bitter. So when you find yourself betrayed by those you once trusted, do not let the enemy use that pain to keep you trapped in anger. Recognize it for what it is, a tactic meant to break you, and instead of letting it win, rise above it. Forgive, let go, and walk forward with the knowledge that no act of betrayal, no matter how deep, can hold you back from the destiny that was meant for you. There comes a time when you have to recognize that not everyone who walks with you is truly for you. Some people are in your life for reasons you may not yet understand, but one thing is certain: if they are not pushing you toward growth, toward peace, toward purpose, then they may be holding you back in ways you cannot yet see. And sometimes the hardest thing to do is to accept that certain relationships must come to an end. There is a weight that comes with carrying people who are not meant to go where you are going, and if you refuse to release them, they will only drain you of the strength you need to move forward. There are relationships that begin with promise, built on shared experiences and familiar comforts. But over time, some of these connections shift in ways that are not healthy. You start to notice the patterns: conversations filled with negativity, actions that betray a lack of true support, a quiet but persistent pull away from the path you know you are meant to walk. You find yourself justifying behaviors that hurt you, making excuses for treatment you would never accept from anyone else, simply because history tells you that this person is supposed to be in your life. But history does not dictate destiny, and not everyone who was with you in the beginning is meant to stay for the journey ahead. One of the most deceptive tactics of the enemy is to plant people in your life who disguise themselves as supporters but operate as silent saboteurs. They wear the mask of friendship, of family, of loyalty, yet their words carry seeds of doubt. Their actions chip away at your confidence, and their presence keeps you bound to old versions of yourself that no longer serve your purpose. It does not always come in the form of outright betrayal. Sometimes it is much quieter than that. It is in the way they diminish your dreams, the way they question your faith when you try to stand firm, the way they keep you tangled in cycles of dysfunction and discouragement. And because you love them, because you have walked with them for so long, you hesitate to acknowledge the truth. You are fighting battles you were never meant to fight because of the people you refuse to let go. Letting go is not an act of cruelty, nor is it a sign of weakness. It is an act of wisdom. It is understanding that spiritual warfare does not only take place in the unseen, it manifests in the people around us, in the relationships that either build us up or break us down. The enemy uses familiarity as a weapon because he knows that we are less likely to question those we trust, less likely to see the danger in those we have loved for years. But if you ignore the signs, if you continue to hold on to what is pulling you away from where you are meant to be, you will find yourself stuck, unable to grow, unable to step into the fullness of your calling. There will be people who resent your decision to walk away. They will accuse you of being disloyal, of thinking you are better than them, of abandoning them. But what they do not understand is that this is not about pride or superiority. It is about survival. It is about recognizing that you cannot save people who do not want to be saved, that you cannot carry people who are determined to remain where they are. It is about knowing that your future is too valuable to be sacrificed for the sake of comfort and familiarity. Walking away does not mean you stop loving them. It does not mean you wish them harm. It simply means you have chosen to protect your spirit, to guard your heart, to ensure that you are surrounded by those who truly want to see you thrive. It means you trust that if a relationship is meant to be restored, it will be. On the right terms, in the right season, when both hearts are aligned with truth. Until then, you move forward without guilt, without hesitation, knowing that your growth is not an act of betrayal, it is an act of obedience. There is a freedom that comes when you release what no longer serves you. There is a peace that settles in your spirit when you stop trying to force connections that have already run their course. And there is a power that comes when you walk boldly toward your purpose, unburdened by the weight of relationships that were never meant to last. The choice is yours. Stay bound to what is draining you, or release it and step into everything that is waiting for you. There comes a moment when you have to decide that your peace, your purpose, and your destiny are more important than the opinions of others. Too often we allow ourselves to be manipulated by guilt, by obligation, by a false sense of loyalty to people who do not truly have our best interests at heart. We stay in toxic relationships because we feel responsible, because we're afraid of what they might say, because we have convinced ourselves that walking away means failure. But the truth is, not everyone is meant to be part of your future. and not everyone deserves access to the deepest parts of who you are. Manipulation is one of the enemy's oldest strategies, and it is often used by the people closest to us. It does not always come in the form of loud demands or obvious control. Sometimes it is much more subtle. It is the way they make you feel guilty for setting boundaries, the way they twist your kindness into obligation, the way they use emotional ties to keep you in situations that drain your spirit. You begin to feel trapped, not because you do not see the problem, but because you fear what will happen if you choose to stand up for yourself. They have conditioned you to believe that their needs, their feelings, their desires should always come before your own. And the moment you dare to choose yourself, they accuse you of being selfish, of being ungrateful, of being unkind. But here is the truth. Setting boundaries is not selfish. Protecting your peace is not unkind. Walking away from manipulation is not a betrayal. It is wisdom. It is recognizing that you cannot pour from an empty cup, that you cannot be who God has called you to be if you are constantly being drained by people who take but never give. It is understanding that love does not demand your silence, that real loyalty does not require self-sacrifice at the expense of your own well-being. There are people who will only love you as long as you are useful to them. The moment you stop meeting their expectations, the moment you begin to grow in ways they cannot control, they will try to make you feel guilty for changing. They will remind you of everything they have done for you, of every moment they were there, as if their past kindness means you owe them your future. But love is not a debt, and true relationships are not built on guilt. If someone only values you for what you can give them, then they never truly valued you at all. It is a hard lesson to learn because we want to believe the best in people. We want to think that those we have poured into, those we have stood by, will do the same for us. And when they don't, it is easy to question ourselves, to wonder if we are the ones who are wrong, if we are the ones being too harsh, too distant, too unforgiving. But manipulation thrives on doubt. It makes you second-guess your instincts, question your reality, and silence your own needs for the sake of keeping the peace. But peace that requires you to suffer in silence is not peace, it is control. There comes a time when you have to take a stand, when you have to decide that your future cannot be dictated by people who refuse to see your worth. That means setting boundaries and not apologizing for them. That means walking away from toxic relationships and not feeling guilty about it. That means recognizing manipulation for what it is and refusing to let it hold you hostage. It will not be easy. Some people will not understand. Some will try to pull you back into the same cycles of guilt and obligation. But if you allow yourself to remain bound by manipulation, you will never step into the freedom that is waiting for you. Your purpose is too great to be hindered by people who only want to keep you small. Your calling is too important to be placed in the hands of those who seek to control you. The people who are truly meant to be in your life will respect your boundaries. They will support your growth. They will celebrate your success rather than resent it. And those who cannot, let them go. Let them talk. Let them misunderstand you. Their opinion does not define your worth, and their manipulation does not determine your destiny. You were never meant to live under the weight of someone else's control. You were created to walk in freedom, to live in peace, to step boldly into the future that is waiting for you. So choose yourself. Choose your peace. Choose the life that was meant for you, not the one someone else is trying to force upon you. And when you do, you will find that the only people who truly belonged in your life were the ones who never needed to manipulate you to keep you close.